The family text buzzed once. Don't contact us. I thought being disowned was the worst part until a carton appeared at 8:17 in the evening, bearing a wax seal I had never seen. Inside lay a photo proving the man they claimed died before I was. Bourne was actually holding me. Beneath that was proof worth tens of millions of dollars, finally explaining why they cut me off right now. My name is Savannah Chapman, and if there is one thing I have learned in 34 years of life, it is that numbers are the only language that does not know how to lie. People lie. They lie about where they were last night. They lie about how much they love you. And they certainly lie about whether they intend to pay you back. But a spreadsheet does not have an ego. A general ledger does not have a hidden agenda. In my office at the Marlin Medical Pavilion, situated right in the heart of Colorado, where the mountains cut the sky into jagged blue shapes, I find peace in the payroll software. My job is simple in theory, but complex in practice. I make sure people get paid for the time they serve. I balance the books. The decimal point is out of place, I find it. The deduction does not match the gross income, I fix it. The finality of it. I like the moment when the columns align and the bottom line turns from a warning red to a satisfying calm black. It is the only place in my world where things make sense. I was sitting on my beige sofa, the one I bought with a bonus check 3 years ago, watching the sun dip below the pine trees outside my window. My phone was resting on the arm of the couch. Buzzed once, just a single short vibration. They usually signaled a coupon from a pizza place or a reminder for a dentist appointment. I picked it up, was a notification from the group chat named The Mercers. My stomach did that familiar little flip it always did when that chat became active. For most people, a family group chat is a place for sharing photos of dogs or planning Thanksgiving dinner. For me, was a minefield where I had to step carefully to avoid blowing up the fragile piece of my existence. The message was from my mother, Diane, Savannah. We have been talking, Gordon, Sabrina, and I. We feel that things have become too toxic lately. We need space to heal as a family unit. Please do not contact us for a while. We'll reach out when we are ready. I stared at the screen. The brightness was turned up too high, burning the white text bubbles into my retinas to heal as a family unit. The implication was subtle but surgical. They were the unit. I was the infection. I watched the screen waiting for the follow-up. Usually, my sister Sabrina would chime in with a crying emoji or a passive-aggressive comment about how hard her life was. Usually, my stepfather Gordon would add a sentence about respecting boundaries, which was rich, coming from a man who had never respected a single boundary of mine since he married my mother when I was 5. But there was nothing, just that block of text. I sat there in the silence of my apartment. The refrigerator hummed in the kitchen. A car drove past outside, its tires crunching on the gravel. I waited for the tears. That is what you're supposed to do, right? When your mother, the woman who gave birth to you, tells you that you are no longer welcome in her life. You are supposed to break down. You are supposed to call them begging to know what you did wrong. You are supposed to promise to be better, to be quieter, to be more generous. You whatever shape they need you to be to fit back into the puzzle. But the tears did not come. Instead, a strange cold sensation washed over me. It started at the base of my neck and spread down to my fingertips. It felt like anesthesia. It felt like the moment before a surgeon makes an incision. I looked at the message again. Do not contact us. For years, I had been the fix-it girl. I was the one who drove over at 2 a.m. when Gordon's truck wouldn't start. I was the one who paid for Sabrina's textbooks when she decided to go to beauty school and then paid for her rent. When she dropped out 3 months later because the instructors were mean to her. I was the one who sat with Diane while she cried about how hard it was to make ends meet. Nodding and writing a check just to make the crying stop. They called me the stable one. That was their code word for the bank. I was the safe harbor they docked at when they had burned down every other bridge. And now they were casting off. I typed a response. My thumbs moved steadily without a tremor. Okay, I will give you exactly what you asked for. I hit send. Then I put the phone face down on the coffee table. I did not block them. Not yet. I just let the silence settle in. It felt heavy, like a wool blanket in summer. But it also felt final. If they wanted space, I would give them a galaxy of it. I stood up and walked to the kitchen to pour a glass of water. My hand was steady. I drank the water, focusing on the cool liquid sliding down my throat. I went to bed early that night. I slept deeply, a dreamless black void, which was unusual. For me, usually I worried. I worried about whether I had offended Gordon at Sunday dinner. I worried if Sabrina was angry that I didn't like her Instagram post fast enough. But that night, the worry was gone, replaced by that cold, clinical calm. The next morning, the sun was bright and offensive. It glared off the hood of my Toyota. Calmly, as I drove to the medical pavilion, I listened to a podcast about forensic accounting. The host was talking about how embezzlers almost always get caught because they get greedy. Okay? They start small, testing the waters, and when no one notices, they take more. They confuse silence with permission. I parked in my usual spot, walked into the building, and sat at my desk. I liked my cubicle. It was organized. My stapler was exactly parallel to my keyboard. My inbox was empty. I opened my payroll software and let the comfort of the grid soothe me. At 10:30 in the morning, my desk phone rang. It was an external line. Morrow Glen Medical Pavilion Payroll Department. "This is Savannah," I said, my voice professional and crisp. "Hi, Savannah. This is Linda. From the leasing office at Oak Creek Apartments." My heart stuttered. Oak Creek was where Diane and Gordon lived. I knew Linda. She was a chatty woman who always had candy on her desk and wore floral scarves. I had been in that office a dozen times, usually dropping off a check because Gordon had forgotten to mail it or because the bank had returned their payment due to insufficient funds. "Hello, Linda," I said, keeping my tone neutral. "Is everything okay? Are my parents all right?" My first instinct was still concern even after the text message. The programming ran deep. "Oh, they are fine, honey," Linda said, her voice bright and cheerful. "I just wanted to call and personally thank you. You are such a good daughter. I know Gordon was worried about the rent increase this renewal period, but getting that set up on autodraft really takes the load off their minds." I froze. My hand gripped the receiver so hard my knuckles turned white. "Autodraft," I repeated. The word tasted like ash in my mouth. "Yes," Linda continued, oblivious to the ice forming in my veins. "Gordon called first thing this morning. He said you were too busy with work to come in, but he had the information ready. We processed the authorization for the new lease term. I just wanted to confirm we have the right billing cycle set up for the first of the month." The room seemed to tilt sideways. The hum of the office air conditioner roared in my ears like a jet engine. "Linda," I said, and my voice sounded incredibly far away. "What account did you set up for the draft?" "The one at First Credit Union," she said. "The checking account ending in 4829. The world stopped. 4829. That was not a shared account. Was not an account I had ever written a check from for them. That was my main personal checking account. It was the account where my paycheck was deposited. It was the account that held my emergency fund. The money I had scraped together over 5 years of skipped vacations and bag lunches. "Did I sign an authorization form, Linda?" I asked. My voice was dropping lower, becoming quieter. "Well, no, not physically," Linda said, sounding a little less cheerful now, perhaps sensing the shift in the atmosphere. "Gordon provided the routing and account numbers over the phone. He said you gave him the go-ahead because you were in meetings all day. Since you have paid by check before and we know you, I went ahead and pushed it through so they would not get hit with a late fee. I was just doing a favor, a favor." "Thank you, Linda," I said. "I need to go now." "Oh, okay. Well, have a great day, Savannah." I hung up the phone, sat there for a full minute staring at the gray fabric wall of my cubicle. They had told me not to contact them. They had demanded space. They had cut me out of the emotional fabric of the family specifically to isolate me, And they had done it exactly 12 hours before using my identity to secure their housing for the next year. Gordon did not just guess those numbers. You did not? Guess a routing number and a checking account number? Kay had to have found it. My mind flashed back to Sunday. Kay had been at their apartment. I had left my purse on the kitchen counter while I went to the bathroom. It was a small window of time, maybe 3 minutes, but 3 minutes is a long time if you know what you're looking for. All they needed was to open my wallet, pull out the checkbook I kept tucked in the back flap, and snap a photo. They stole the numbers. Then they waited until Tuesday to use them, and on Monday night, they sent the text. They broke up with me to ensure I wouldn't be around to ask questions until the money was already gone. They banked on my passive nature, banked on the fact that Savannah always fixes it. Savannah always pays. Savannah never makes a scene. I unlocked my cell phone and opened my banking app. Our fingers were cold, but they did not tremble. I logged in. I clicked on pending transactions. There it was. Oak Creek Management LLC. The amount was pending. $2,450 first month, last month, and the security deposit upgrade they had mentioned weeks ago. I stared at the number. It was not just money. Money can be replaced. I could earn more money, but this was my name. This was my private information. This was a violation so intimate it felt physical. They had taken the numbers that defined my financial existence and used them to buy comfort for themselves, while telling me I was too toxic to be spoken to. They did not just treat me like an ATM. You have to put a card in an ATM. You have to have a PIN. They treated me like a stolen wallet. I looked at the transaction again. Pending, I could stop. I could call the bank right now and report it as fraud. But if I did that, the police would be involved. Linda would be questioned. She would say Gordon gave her the numbers. Gordon would be arrested for fraud and identity theft. Diane would be an accessory. They knew I knew this. They were betting everything on the fact that I was too weak to put my own parents in handcuffs. They thought the text message would make me sad, make me desperate to win them back. Make me swallow this theft as just another price of admission to the Mercer family circus. I looked at the text message from the night before. We need space. I looked at the bank transaction. It's $2,450. A strange sound escaped my throat. It was a laugh, but it was dry and sharp, like glass breaking. They wanted distance. Tia. I closed the banking app. I did not call the bank. Not yet. I opened my spreadsheet software. I opened a new blank workbook. I typed 3 headers at the top of the first sheet. Diane, Gordon, Sabrina, I was going to give them distance. I was going to give them silence. But first, I was going to look at the numbers because the numbers do not lie. And for the first time in my life, I was going to make sure the numbers fought back. I stared at the pending charge one last time. They thought they had secured their rent. What they had actually done was hand me the weapon I needed to sever the tie forever. To understand how I ended up staring at a fraud report on a Tuesday morning, you have to understand the architecture of the house I grew up in. It was not built on bricks and mortar. It was built on a very specific, very heavy sentence that hung over our dinner table like a chandelier made of lead. Family helps family. It sounds beautiful, does it not? It sounds like a Norman Rockwell painting. Sounds like a promise of mutual support, a safety net woven from blood and loyalty. It's in the Mercer household, that sentence had a silent footnote. It had terms and conditions that were never read aloud, but were enforced with religious strictness. Family helps family meant that I helped them. I was the designated donor organ. I was the universal blood type. My stepfather, Gordon, was a master of the guilt transaction. He did not ask for money directly. That would be too crude for a man who prided himself on being the head of the household. Instead, he dealt in the currency of obligation. He would sit in his recliner, the one with the duct tape on the armrest, and talk about the sacrifices of parenthood as if he were a martyr explaining his wounds. He would look at me when I was 16, 17, 18 and say things like, Savannah, raising a child in this economy is like bleeding slowly. We put food in your mouth. We put a roof over your head. Kept the lights on, even when it meant I had to work double shifts. It made the basic requirements of keeping a child alive sound like a loan he had graciously extended to me. He made me feel that my very existence was a debt I had acred, a massive red number on a ledger that I would spend the rest of my life paying off. You do not owe your parents rent for existing. I know that now. But when you are 22 and the man who raised you looks at you with tired, disappointed eyes, you believe you owe him everything. Then there was my mother, Diane. Diane did not use guilt. She used performance art. My mother could turn the act of opening a utility bill into a Shakespearean tragedy. I remember weekends visiting from college and later from my own apartment. We would be sitting in the living room, the TV playing some game show in the background. Diane would pick up an envelope from the coffee table. She would put on her reading glasses. She would open the paper, then the sigh. It was a long, trembling exhale that seemed to deflate her entire body. She would lower the paper, take off her glasses, and rub the bridge of her nose with her thumb and forefinger. She would not say a word. She would just let the silence stretch until it became unbearable. The air in the room would grow heavy. Gordon would grunt. Sabrina would be on her phone, oblivious. And I, trained like a Pavlovian dog, would feel the panic rising in my chest. "What is it, Mom?" I would ask. "Oh, nothing," she would say, her voice weak. "Just the electricity. The rates went up again. I do not know how we are going to manage this month with the car insurance due too, but do not worry. Savannah, we will figure it out. We always do. Maybe we just will not buy groceries next week." That was the cue. That was the trigger. "How much is it?" I would ask, reaching for my purse. "No, honey. Cannot take your money," she would say, while already sliding the bill across the table toward me. "I have it," I would insist. "Let me pay it, please." And then the transformation. Her face would soften. She would smile, a genuine, warm smile that made me feel like the sun had just come out. "You are such a good girl, Savannah. I do not know what I would do without you. You are the rock of this family." That praise was addictive. It was a drug. I was the rock. I was the good one. For the low price of $150, I could buy the feeling of being cherished. I could purchase a week of peace, and then there was Sabrina. If I was the rock, Sabrina was the hurricane. My younger sister was beautiful, chaotic, and perpetually the victim of a world that simply did not understand her brilliance. She was the golden child, the one whose tantrums were tolerated, whose failures were cushioned, and whose dreams were funded by everyone else. Sabrina did not have bills. She had crises. Her life was a series of high-stakes emergencies that required immediate cash infusions. I need new tires, or I cannot get to my interview. My landlord is kicking me out because the roommate lied about the rent. I found this stray dog, Savannah, and he has a broken leg. If we do not pay the vet $2,000 right now, they will put him down. You do not want him to die, do you? It was never a request. It was a hostage situation. If I said no, I was. Not just cheap, I was cruel. I was the reason she lost the job. I was the reason she was homeless. I was the reason the dog died. So I paid for the tires, I paid the rent. I paid the vet bills for animals she kept for 3 weeks before giving them away to a shelter because they were too much work. I was a payroll specialist. I understood compound interest, but I failed to see the compound interest of my own enabling. It was not just the big checks. It was the constant low-level bleeding. It was paying for dinner every time we went out because Savannah has the good job. It was filling up Diane's gas tank because she forgot her wallet. It was buying Sabrina a new phone because she dropped hers in a toilet at a club. $1.50 here, $20 there, $200 on a Friday night. I told myself I was being generous. I told myself this was what successful people did. They lifted up their families. I was the stable one. I was the one who made it. It was my duty to share the wealth, even if that wealth was just a lower middle class salary that I hoarded by driving a 10-year-old car and never buying myself new clothes. I did not have friends who understood. They all had normal families where parents bought their children dinner or at least went Dutch. But I had Uncle Ray. Ray was Dion's older brother. But you would never know they shared DNA. Diane was soft edges and passive aggression. Ray was sandpaper and hard truths. He lived in a trailer about 20 meters out of town, drove a truck that sounded like a dying dinosaur, and had no patience for the Mercer. Family dynamics. He was the black sheep because he refused to play the game. He had stopped talking to Gordon 10 years ago after. Gordon tried to borrow money for a business scheme that involved selling vitamins out of a garage. Ray was the only person who looked at me and saw Savannah, not a walking wallet. About 6 months before the text message, I went to see him. I was stressed. Sabrina had just demanded $600 for a certification class she swore would change her life. And Gordon had made a comment about my new coat being fancy while his boots were leaking. I sat on Ray's porch drinking iced tea from a plastic cup. The air smelled of pine needles and cigarette smoke. "You look tired, kid," Ray said. He was leaning back in a rusted lawn chair, whittling a piece of wood with a pocket knife. "I am fine," I said automatically. "Just work and the family." Ray snorted. "The family? You mean the parasites?" "Don't call them that, Uncle Ray. They are struggling." "They are not struggling," Savannah said, pointing the knife at me for emphasis. "They are feeding. There is a difference. A struggler tries to swim. A feeder just latches on to the nearest warm body and sucks until the host is dry." I looked down at my tea. "They love me, do they?" Ari asked. His voice wasn't mean. It was incredibly gentle. "Or do they love that you make the problems go away? Do they love you, or do they love the fact that you never say no?" "That is harsh," I whispered. "Truth usually is," said. He sat up and looked me in the eye. "Listen to me. You have this idea in your head that you have to pay for your spot at the table. You think that if you stop paying, they will take your chair away." I felt a lump form in my throat. He had named the terror I had never dared to speak. "You do not owe parents rent for existing." Ray said he spoke each word clearly, like he was engraving them into the air between us. "You did not ask to be born. They made a choice. Raising you was the job they signed up for. You do not owe them back pay for your childhood. But they need help," I argued weakly. "They need a reality check," countered. "And you are the only one who can give it to them. But you won't. You're too scared they will stop loving you." I did not answer. He was right. Sighed and went back to his whittling. "I am going to tell you something, Savannah, and I want you to remember it. One day you are going to close the bank. One day you are going to say no. And on that day, you are going to see who they really are. When the money stops, the mask falls." "I don't think they are that bad," I said. "They are my family." Just looked at me sadly. "The blood of the covenant is thicker than the water of the womb, kid, but sometimes blood is just a way to track a shark to its prey." I left his trailer that day feeling defensive. I thought was bitter. I thought he was just a lonely old man who didn't understand the complex bond I had with my mother. And, sister, I told myself that my generosity was the glue holding us all together. I drove home and transferred the $600 to Sabrina. She sent me a text with 3 heart emojis. Felt that warm glow of validation. See? Uncle Ray was wrong. They loved me. Now sitting in my cubicle with the fraud report burning a hole in my screen, Ray's voice echoed in my head like a prophecy. "When the money stops, the mask falls." I had not even stopped the money yet. I had just agreed to give them space. I had just followed their instructions, and their immediate reaction, their first instinct upon realizing I was stepping back, was not to miss me. It was not to worry about our relationship. was to steal from me before I could get away. They sensed the bank was closing hours, so they decided to rob the vault. I looked at the 3 columns on my spreadsheet. Diane, Gordon, Sabrina. Started entering the data. I went back 7 years. That was as far back as my digital banking records went. First, the recurring costs. Diane's cell phone family plan, $180 per month. I had been paying the full bill for 4 years because it is easier if one person handles it. Gordon car insurance, $112 per month. He was supposed to pay me back in cash. I checked my deposit records. He had paid me back exactly 3 times in 48 months. Sabrina's streaming services, $45 per month. She had my passwords. She had my login for everything. Then the one-time events. Emergency vet bill, $2,100. Bail money for Sabrina's boyfriend, who she broke up with 2 days later, $500 new transmission for Gordon's truck. $1,800. Mother's Day spa weekend for Diane and Sabrina. I stayed home to work, $600. The numbers began to scroll down the screen, row after row. It was a waterfall of numbers. I felt sick, physically sick, but I also felt a strange cold clarity. I had spent my entire adult life trying to be the good. Investment. I thought if I put enough equity into this family, eventually I would get a dividend of love. I looked at the total sum at the bottom of the spreadsheet as I kept adding. It was already enough to put a down payment on a house. It was enough to travel the world. Ray was right. I hadn't been helping them. I had been paying them a salary to be my relatives, and yesterday they had fired me. But the thing about firing the payroll specialist is that you better make sure you stay. Have all the passwords, and you better make sure you haven't left any incriminating paper. Trails, because now the payroll specialist was becoming the auditor. I picked up my phone. I wasn't going to call them, wasn't going to scream, was going to wait because Ray had said the day you close the bank you will see who they really are. Well, the bank was officially closed. The vault was locked. And I was about to watch the monsters come out of the dark. Little did I know, the first monster was already at the door, and it wasn't who I thought it was. It was the ghost of a past I didn't even know existed. But before I could get to the ghost, I had to survive the final desperate clawing of the living. I saved the spreadsheet. I named it the Mercer Ledger. Then I went back to work. I had a job to do. I had to verify the hours for 300 hospital employees. Had to make sure their families got fed. Had a family? They had apparently already eaten, and they had eaten me alive. To fully understand the weight of the silence that followed my text message, you have to go back 48 hours. You have to go back to that Sunday afternoon in Diane and Gordon's living room where the air smelled of stale. Instant coffee and the television was blaring a rerun of a courtroom reality show. It was a perfect, suffocating tableau of the normal I had endured for decades. I was sitting on the love seat, my purse tucked safely beside me, or so I thought. Diane was on the main sofa filing her nails. Gordon was in his recliner staring at the TV with a glazed expression, and then Sabrina burst in. My sister did not enter rooms. She invaded them. She flung the door open, her face glowing with the manic energy she always had when she wanted something expensive. I found it, she announced, dropping her keys on the dining table. I found the perfect place. Diane looked up, smiling instantly. Tell us, honey, is it the one in North Quill District? Yes. Sabrina spun around, her phone in hand, pulling up photos. It is gorgeous. Mom, it has exposed brick walls, a skylight, and it is walking distance to all the bars. It is literally my dream apartment. I can finally start my vlog properly there. The lighting is perfect. I felt a familiar tightening in my chest. North Quill District. That was the trendy, gentrified part of town where rent prices were astronomical. That sounds expensive, I said quietly. Sabrina shot me a look that was half pity, half annoyance. It is an investment, Savannah. You have to spend money to make money. My brand needs the right aesthetic. How much? Gordon grunted, not looking away from the TV. Sabrina hesitated for a fraction of a second, just long enough to signal that the number was going to be painful. Well, the rent is $2,000 a month, but they need first, last, and a security deposit. Plus the pet fee for Luna. Luna was her cat, an animal I had paid to have spayed last year. So what is the total movine cost? I asked, already doing the math in my head. $6,200, Sabrina said quickly, ripping off the Band-Aid. The room went silent. Even the TV judge seemed to pause his gavel mid-air. $6, $200? That was a used car. That was a year of community college tuition. That was almost exactly the amount I had in my emergency savings account. The money I had saved, dollar by painful dollar, skipping lunches, driving a car with a broken heater. Wearing shoes until the soles wore through. Wow, Diane said, her voice soft and breathless. That is a lot. But oh, Sabrina, it sounds perfect. For you, you deserve a fresh start after that awful roommate situation. Then, as if choreographed, 3 heads turned toward me. It was a synchronized movement I knew well. The pivot. The moment the problem was presented and the solution was identified sitting on the love seat. Svana, Diane said, her tone dripping with assumed cooperation. That is a bit steep for us right now with Gordon's hours being cut, but surely you can help your sister get settled. It is just temporary. Once her channel takes off, she will pay you back. She will pay you back. The 5 most fictional words in the English language. I don't have $6,000 lying around to give away, Kai said. My voice was steady, but my heart was hammering against my ribs. It is not giving away, Sabrina wed, dropping onto the arm of the sofa. It is a loan, God. Why do you always have to be so dramatic about money? You have a real job. You have savings. I know you do. You bragged about hitting your goal last month. I had not bragged. I had mentioned in a moment of weakness that I had finally reached my 6-month emergency fund. Goal. I had shared it because I was proud. I should have known better than to bleed in a shark tank. That is my emergency fund, I said. It is for emergencies. Losing my job, getting sick, a car accident. This is an emergency, Sabrina cried, her eyes filling with instant weaponized tears. If I do not sign the lease by Tuesday, I lose the apartment. Someone else will take it. Do you want me to be homeless? Do you want me to live in this dump forever? Hey, Gordon snapped, looking at Sabrina. Watch it. Sorry, Daddy, she sniffed. Then she glared at me. See? I am trapped here. I need to grow. Why are you blocking my growth? I am not blocking anything, I said. I am just saying I cannot empty my entire savings account for an apartment you cannot afford. If the rent is $2,000 and you work part-time at the boutique, how are you going to pay the rent next month and the month after that? I will figure it out, Sabrina screamed. Why are you so negative? You always do this? You always try to ruin my happiness with your math. Savannah Gordon said his voice was low and dangerous. He turned his recliner to face me. Your sister needs a leg up. We are family. Family helps family. You are sitting on a pile of cash doing nothing. She has a chance to build a life. Don't be greedy. Greedy, I repeated. The word felt like a slap. I drive a 2010 Camry. I haven't bought new clothes in 2 years. I save that money because I'm terrified of ending up with nothing. How is that greedy? Because you are hoarding it while your family suffers, Gordon shouted. He stood up, looming. Over the coffee table, who raised you? Who put food on your table, Kay? Now you have a little bit of success and you think you are better than us. You think you can look down on us. I am not looking down on you, I said, standing up to. My legs felt shaky. I am saying no. The word hung in the air. Simple, flat, final. No, I had never said it like that before. I had said, I can't right now, or let me see what I can do. But I had never just said no. The reaction was chemical. Sabrina's face transformed. The cute pleading pout vanished, replaced by a mask of cold, hard hatred. Her eyes narrowed. "You are such a bitch," she hissed. "You are a selfish, jealous, you don't want me to have the apartment because you are miserable in your little cubicle life and you want me to be miserable too?" "Sabrina," Diane gasped. But she didn't look at Sabrina. She looked at me, her eyes wide with betrayal. "Savannah, how can you be so cold? I didn't raise you to be this way. I didn't raise you to turn your back on your own blood over paper. It is just money. If it is just money," I said, clutching my purse strap, "then you pay it." Diane recoiled as if I had struck her. She put a hand to her chest. "You know we can't. Do you know how hard we try? How dare you throw our poverty in our faces?" "I am not throwing anything. I said I am leaving." I walked toward the door. Every step felt like walking through waist-deep water. My body was screaming at me to turn around, to apologize, to write the check, to fix the tension. The programming was so deep. The guilt was searing. "If you walk out that door," Gordon yelled after me, "don't expect us to be here when you need us. You are choosing your bank account over your family." "I don't need you," I whispered to myself. "I need you to stop needing me." I opened the door. "Savannah," Diane cried out, her voice cracking, "please just think about it. She really needs this." I didn't look back. I stepped out into the hallway and closed the door behind me. I leaned against the peeling paint of the corridor wall for a moment, breathing hard. My heart was pounding like a drum solo. I felt lighted. I had done it. I had said no. I had protected my safety net. I walked down the stairs and out to my car. My hands were shaking so badly I dropped my keys twice before I could unlock the door. I sat in the driver's seat and locked the doors. I felt safe. I felt proud. I didn't know. I didn't know that while I was in the bathroom earlier that afternoon, washing my hands and steeling myself for the conversation, my purse had been sitting on the kitchen counter. I didn't know that Gordon had quietly opened my wallet. I didn't know that he hadn't just looked for cash. He had pulled out my checkbook. He had pulled out my driver's license. He had taken his phone and snapped clear, high-resolution photos of the routing number, the account number, and my personal details. I drove away thinking I had won the battle. I drove away thinking that my no had ended the negotiation. I had no idea that my no was just the signal for them to bypass my permission entirely. They didn't need my consent. They had my data. And 2 days later, when that text message arrived telling me not to contact them, I thought it was punishment for my refusal. I thought it was emotional retaliation. I was wrong. It wasn't punishment. It was a getaway strategy. They were buying time. They were creating a zone of silence so that when the charge hit, when they used the information they stole to pay for the very apartment I had refused to fund, I wouldn't be calling them to scream. I would be sitting in my apartment respecting their boundaries while they spent my money. As I drove home that Sunday, listening to the tires hum on the asphalt, I felt a strange sense of liberation. I thought the worst was over, but the worst hadn't even started. The robbery had already happened. I just hadn't checked the vault yet. Tuesday morning at the Marlin Medical Pavilion usually had a specific rhythm. It was a rhythm I found soothing. It was the sound of 300 employees clocking in, the hum of the server room cooling fans, and the rhythmic clicking of my keyboard as I processed the weekly adjustments. The air always smelled faintly of antiseptic and floor wax, a sterile scent that I associated with safety. Here, the rules were clear. Overtime was calculated at 1.5 times the base rate. Taxes were withheld according to the federal tables. There was no ambiguity. I was trying desperately to cling to that clarity. My phone sat on my desk, face down like a dormant grenade. I had not received any more texts from my family since the "Do Not Contact Us" message. and I had adhered to their request with a silence that felt heavy and suffocating. I was trying to focus on the screen in front of me, verifying a nurse's shift differential when my desk phone rang. It was not an internal extension. The caller ID read Oak Creek Management Office. Oak Creek was the apartment complex where my mother and Gordon lived. It was a sprawling beige stucco development about 15 minutes from my office. I stared at the blinking red light for a second. My first thought was a medical emergency. Had Gordon had a heart attack? Had Diane fallen? Despite everything, despite the text, despite the years of financial bleeding, the daughter in me still panicked. I picked up the receiver. Morrow Glen Payroll. This is Savannah. Hi, Savannah. This is Brenda down at the leasing office. Brenda. I knew her. She was a woman with a smoker's rasp and a desk perpetually covered in cat hair. We had spoken many times. Usually when I was dropping off a check because Gordon had forgotten to mail his high. Brenda, I said, keeping my voice steady. Is everything okay? Oh, everything is great, honey. Brenda chirped, her tone uncharacteristically. Bright, I just wanted to call and give you a personal thank you. I know I was riding Gordon pretty hard about the R's, but getting that full balance cleared up really gets corporate off my back. The world seemed to stop spinning. The fluorescent lights above me hummed a low, insect-like buzz that suddenly felt deafening. Cleared up? I asked. The words felt thick in my mouth. Yes, the payment went through this morning, Brenda continued, oblivious to the ice spreading through my veins, and setting up the A for the future payments was a smart move. It saves you that $35 processing fee for paper checks. I gripped the edge of my desk so hard my fingernails turned white. H Automated Clearinghouse. That meant a direct withdrawal from a bank account. Brenda, I said, and I was proud that my voice did not shake. How much was the payment? Let me pull up the ledger, she said. I heard the clacking of keys. Okay, here it is. It was the 2 months of back rent, the late fees, and the pet deposit adjustment. The total draft was $3,422.50, $3,422. The room tilted. That was not just money. That was my safety. That was the cushion I kept for when my car broke down. That was the money I had defended just 2 days ago when I told Sabrina. No, Brenda, I asked, my voice dropping to a whisper. What account did you use? The one Gordon gave me, she said. He called yesterday afternoon. He said you were swamped at work and couldn't come in to sign the authorization, but that you were on the other line giving the go-ahead. He read off the routing and account numbers. It is the first credit union account ending in 4,829. My checking account. My primary account. I closed my eyes. The image of Sunday afternoon flashed behind my eyelids with high-def clarity. The smell of instant coffee, the noise of the TV. Me standing up to go to the bathroom. My purse, a brown leather tote sitting on the kitchen counter. I had been in the bathroom for maybe 3 minutes. I remembered washing my hands, looking in the mirror, and telling myself to be strong before going back out to deny Sabrina the money. In those 3 minutes, Gordon had not just been watching TV. He had walked to the counter, he had opened my bag, he had taken out my checkbook. He'd either written down the numbers or more likely snapped a photo with his smartphone. He had stolen my identity while I was flushing the toilet in his home. Savannah, you there? Brenda asked. I am here, I said. Is everything okay? You sound a little quiet. I had a choice. Right then and there, I had a choice. I could tell Brenda the truth. I could say I did not authorize this. This is theft. This is fraud. If I said those words, the bank would reverse the charge. The police would be notified. An investigation would be opened. Identity theft and bank fraud are felonies. Gordon would be arrested. Diane, if she knew, would be implicated. My parents would be put in handcuffs. They knew this. They'd calculated this. They were betting their freedom on the fact that I was too weak, too good to send my own parents to prison. They were weaponizing my morality against me. They knew I would eat the loss rather than destroy the family. I am fine, Brenda. I lied. The taste of bile was in my throat. I forgot the total was that high. Thanks for calling. No problem. You are a lifesaver. Savannah, tell your mom I said hi. I hung up the phone. Did not scream. I did not cry. I sat in my ergonomic chair and stared at a spreadsheet of nurse overtime hours. But the numbers were swimming. $3,000. They had not just asked for help. They had bypassed my consent entirely. They had stripped me of my agency. They had decided that my money was their property. And my no was just a suggestion they could overrule with a little light larceny. I stood up. I am taking an early lunch. I told my supervisor. Janet. I didn't wait for her answer. I grabbed my purse, the same purse they had violated, and walked. Out of the building, I got into my car. The heat was stifling, but I didn't turn on the air conditioning. I needed to feel the heat. I needed to feel something other than the cold, dead numbness in my chest. I drove to Oak Creek Apartments. I did not speed. A furious person speeds. A heartbroken person speeds. I drove exactly the speed limit, 35 miles per hour. I used my turn signals. I stopped completely at stop signs. This was not a drive of passion. This was a funeral procession for the relationship I had spent 34 years trying to keep alive. I parked in a visitor spot. I walked up the concrete stairs to Unit 2B. I didn't knock. I had a key I had paid to have copied 3 years ago when they locked themselves out. I unlocked the door and pushed it open. The apartment looked exactly the same as it had on Sunday. The TV was on. Diane was sitting at the small dining table eating a sandwich. Gordon was in the kitchen pouring a glass of milk. They looked up as I entered. For a split second, I saw panic in Diane's eyes. She knew. She knew exactly why I was there. But Gordon just took a sip of milk and set the glass down. We told you we needed space, Gordon said. His voice was casual, bordering on bored. You don't listen very well, do you? I stood in the doorway. I didn't close it. I wanted the exit to be clear. You stole from me, I said. My voice was not loud. It was flat, devoid of inflection. You took my routing number. You authorized a payment of $3,400 without my permission. Diane put her sandwich down. She wiped her mouth with a paper napkin, her hand trembling slightly. Savannah, stop being so dramatic. We didn't steal. We borrowed. Borrowing requires asking, I said. Borrowing requires consent. You waited until I was in the bathroom and you went through my purse like a common thief. Watch your mouth, Gordon snapped, pointing a finger at me. I am your father. You are my stepfather, I corrected him. And you are a criminal. Do you realize? I could have the police here in 10 minutes. Do you realize that is bank fraud? Gordon laughed. It was a dry, dismissive sound. But you won't, will you? You are not going to put your mother through that. You are not going to ruin Sabrina's life by having her parents dragged off. He walked out of the kitchen and leaned against the doorframe, crossing his arms. He looked satisfied. He looked like a man who had called a bluff and won. We needed the rent paid, he said, shrugging. You have the money? We didn't. It is simple math, Savannah. You were being stubborn on Sunday, so we had to take executive action. You will get over it. You always do. You will make more money next week. You will get over it. That was the sentence. That was the moment the bridge collapsed. He didn't see me as a person. He didn't see my hard work, my long hours, my sacrifices. He saw me as a resource that had malfunctioned and needed to be forced open. He felt entitled to my labor. He felt entitled to my life. I looked at Diane. Mom, do you have anything to say? She looked down at the table. We were desperate. Savannah, we didn't want to be evicted. You have to understand, family helps family. No, I said family doesn't rob family. I looked around the apartment. I looked at the TV I had bought them for Christmas 2 years ago. I looked at the curtains I had hemmed. I looked at the people I had desperately tried to please for 3 decades, and I felt nothing. The anger was gone. The hurt was gone. In their place was something much more dangerous. Observation. I was no longer their daughter. I was an auditor. At a crime scene. Okay, I said. Gordon blinked. He seemed surprised by how quickly I had capitulated. Okay, so we are good. I said okay. I repeated. I am leaving now. Good, Gordon said, turning back to the kitchen. And don't come back until you can respect our boundaries. We still need space. You will have it, I said. You will have all the space in the world. I turned around and walked out. I didn't slam the door. I closed it gently until the latch clicked. I walked down the stairs, my heels clicking on the concrete. The sun was shining brightly, which felt insulting. I got back into my car. I put the key in the ignition, but I didn't turn it. I sat there, gripping the steering wheel. They thought they had one. They thought they had successfully called my bluff. They thought that because I didn't call the police, I was powerless. But they were wrong. There are 2 ways to destroy a person. One is with a badge and a gun. The other is with paper. I was a payroll specialist. I knew how to track a penny through a hurricane. I knew how to build a paper trail so thick and so heavy it could crush a man without me ever raising my voice. I looked up at their window on the 2nd floor. I am not going to cry. I whispered to the empty car. And I am not going to call the police. I reached into my glove compartment and pulled out a small notepad and a pen. I wrote down the date. I wrote down the time. I wrote down the exact amount stolen. I wrote down Brenda's name. Then I put the car in reverse. I wasn't going to fight them with emotions. I wasn't going to fight them with guilt. I was going to fight them with a file. And as I drove away, leaving Oak Creek behind me, I knew one thing for certain. The Savannah who paid the bills was dead. The Savannah who kept the receipts had just been born. I returned to my apartment at 4:30 in the afternoon. The silence in my living room was usually a source of loneliness, but today it felt like a clean slate. It felt like a sterile laboratory waiting for an experiment. I did not change out of my workflow. I did not pour a glass of wine. I did not cry. I walked straight to my home office, a small nook in the corner of the living room, and sat down at my desk. I opened my laptop. I cracked my knuckles. For the last decade, I had been the family emotional sponge. Today, I was becoming their forensic accountant. I logged into my bank account. I logged into my credit card portal. I retrieved the shoebox from the top of my closet where I kept old paper receipts, the ones I was too paranoid to throw away. I synced my phone messages to my desktop. I opened a new spreadsheet. I named it The Hemorrhage. I created 3 columns: bold font, size 14, column A, Diane, column B, Gordon, column C, Sabrina. I started with the current year and worked backward. The rhythm of the data entry became a trance. Click, type, enter. Click, type, enter. January 14th, transfer to Sabrina. Venmo note, emergency tire repair. Amount $150. I cross-referenced this with her Instagram archive. On January 15th, she had posted a photo of new boots with the caption, Retail Therapy. The boots cost exactly $150. I entered the number in column C, February 3rd. Payment to Gordon's mechanic. Memo transmission fluid. Amount $200. I remember. That day, Gordon had called me from the side of the road, sounding desperate. He said he was stranded. A T paid the mechanic over the phone. I entered the number in column B, March 10th. Grocery delivery for Diane. Amount $340. I looked at the itemized receipt in my email history. Filet mignon. Expensive wine. Brand name detergents. That same week, I had been eating ramen noodles because I was trying to save for a new laptop battery. I entered the number in column A. The hours ticked by. The sun went down, casting long orange shadows across my desk. But I did not turn on the light. I worked by the glow of the monitor as I went. Deeper into the past, the small favors began to mutate into a terrifying monster. $1.24 pizza here, $50 for a phone bill there, tank of gas, a co-way at the dentist, a deposit for a rental car because Gordon did not have a credit card. These were the invisible costs of being a good daughter. They were the price of admission. To the family, individually, they were mosquitoes, annoying, but manageable. But when I lined them up in rows of black and white pixels, they were a swarm of locusts that had devoured my future. I reached the 7-year mark. That was as far back as the digital records went reliably. I highlighted the columns. I clicked the auto sum button. I sat back in my chair and stared at the bottom right corner of the screen. The total was not just a number. It was a house, was a graduate degree. It was a retirement plan. It was the freedom I had denied myself because I was too busy subsidizing their dysfunction. Total $8,241,562. $82,000. I felt a wave of nausea, but it passed quickly, replaced by a cold, hard rage. That was not support. That was embezzlement disguised as love. I looked at the breakdown. Sabrina was the most expensive, clocking in at nearly $40,000 on her own. Between the failed beauty school tuition, the apartment deposits she forfeited, and the endless stream of emergency cash, she cost more than a luxury vehicle. Gordon was next. His costs were lump sums, truck repairs, failed business ventures. It's the time he borrowed $2,000 for a landscaping startup that never bought a single lawnmower. And Diane, her total was the lowest, but it was the most insidious. It was the death by 1,000 cuts. The utilities, the groceries. It's the small things that kept the household running so Gordon and Sabrina could drain the larger amounts. I saved the file. Then I opened a new browser window. It was time for the purge. I started with the streaming services. Netflix, change password, sign out of all devices. Hulu, change password, sign out of all devices. Spotify family plan, remove. Member Sabrina, remove member Gordon. I watched the user remove notifications pop up on the screen with a grim satisfaction. It was petty, perhaps, but it was symbolic. They wanted to be independent. They could buy their own music. Next, the credit cards. I called the customer service line for my primary credit card. I need to remove 2 authorized users from my account. I told the representative, Diane Mercer and Sabrina Mercer. Certainly, ma'am. Consider it done. Their cards will be declined immediately. Thank you, I said, and please issue me a new card with a new number, just in case they wrote the old one down. Smart move, the representative said. Finally, the cell phone plan. This was the big one. I had been paying the family plan for 6 years. It was $210 a month. I logged into the provider's website. I selected their 3 lines. I clicked Suspend Service. A warning box popped up. Suspending service will prevent these lines from making or receiving calls and using data. Are you sure? I hovered my mouse over the Yes button. I thought about the text message they sent me. Don't contact us. We need space. I clicked Yes. The screen refreshed. Status suspended. I sat back. The silence in the room seemed to deepen. The connection was severed. The digital umbilical cord was cut. I picked up my phone. It was time to send the notification. I did not want to write a long, emotional letter. I did not want to explain my hurt. Explaining is a form of negotiation, and I was done negotiating. I opened the group chat. The last message was still their decree of exile. I typed, I have received your request for distance. I respect it fully. However, you seem to have forgotten that I pay for the infrastructure of your lives. Distance includes finances. I have removed you from my insurance, canceled your access to my streaming accounts, suspended the cell phone lines, and removed you as authorized users on my credit cards. Do not try to use the cards. They will trigger a fraud alert. I paused. I needed to be clear about the unauthorized rent payment. The theft that started this forensic deep dive regarding the $3,400 you took from my account via a yesterday without my consent. Consider that my final severance package to this family. Do not ask for another penny. Do not contact me when the lights go out. You wanted to be a unit without me. Now you are. I hit send. I placed the phone on the desk face up. I counted 1, 2, 3, 4. At 5 seconds, the phone lit up. It was a call from Diane. I watched it ring. I did not answer. The ringing stopped. Then it started again immediately. Gordon, I watched his name flash on the screen. Stepdad calling. I let it go to voicemail. Then the text messages started coming in. They arrived like machine gun fire, vibrating the phone across the hard surface of the desk. Diane, Savannah, what is this? The TV just turned off. We can't log in. Sabrina, WTF, my data just cut out. I am at the mall. How am I supposed to call an Uber? Turn it back on right now? Gordon, you ungrateful little brat. You think? This is funny. You turn the phones back on or I'm coming over there. I watched the messages roll in. It was fascinating. There was no apology. There was no, oh God, we pushed her too far. There was only anger that the appliance had stopped working. When your toaster stops toasting, you don't ask the toaster how it feels. You hit it? They were hitting me, Diane, Savannah. Please. Ayo. Are overreacting? We didn't mean cut us off like this. We just meant we needed emotional space to heal. We didn't mean you should stop helping the family. You are punishing your sister for no reason. Sabrina, I literally cannot buy my latte. The card declined. Everybody is looking at me. I hate you. You are ruining my life. Gordon, pick up the phone now. I decided to reply one last time. I wanted to etch this boundary in stone. I typed, money is a form of communication. You told me not to contact you. If I am simply complying with your request. If I am ceasing all forms of communication, including the currency-based kind. I hit send. Then I did something I should have done years ago. I went to the settings of my phone. I opened the Do Not Disturb menu. I set it to allow calls from no one. Put the phone down. My heart was beating slow and hard, heavy thudding in my ears. It wasn't panic anymore. It was the adrenaline of combat. I looked at the spreadsheet again. $82,000. I printed the page, the printer word to life, spitting out the single sheet of paper that summarized the cost of my childhood trauma. I held it in my hand. It felt light, but the ink carried the weight of a mortgage. I stood up and walked to the kitchen. I needed water. My throat was dry. I looked at the clock on the microwave. 8:17 in the evening. The apartment was dark now, save for the streetlights filtering through the blinds. And then the doorbell rang. My stomach dropped. Gordon, he had said he was coming over. He had a key. Panic flared for a second. I looked at the deadbolt. I had locked it. But if he had his key, I rushed to the door, my hand hovering over the chain lock. I peered through the peephole, ready to call 911, but it wasn't Gordon. Standing under the yellow glow of the hallway light was a man in a faded denim jacket, holding a lit cigarette in one hand and balancing a stack of cardboard boxes with the other. 'Twas Uncle Ray. I unlocked the door and threw it open. Uncle Ray, I breathed, the relief making my knees weak. What are you doing here? Ray didn't smile. He looked tired. He looked grim. He dropped the cigarette on the concrete and crushed it with the heel of his boot. I was over at your mom's, Ray said. His voice was growly, like tires on a dirt road. Went to drop off some tools Gordon borrowed 6 months ago, walking up the drive. See them carrying these out to the dumpster. He gestured to the 3 medium-sized cartons in his arms. They were dusty. The cardboard was soft with age. They were raging about you, Ree continued, screaming about cut-off phones and declined cards. Gordon was shouting that he was going to erase every trace of you from that house. Said he was throwing out your junk. I looked at the boxes. I recognized the handwriting on the side of the top one. Savannah's room 2012. He was tossing them in the trash. Ray said, "I told him I would take them to the dump for him. Figured you might want to see what junk they were throwing away before it ended up in a landfill." He pushed past me gently and set the boxes down on my entry table. "Thank you, Ree," I said. "I just cut him off completely." "I know," Ree said. He looked at me, and for the first time I saw a flicker of pride in his weathered face. I heard them screaming. "You finally closed the bank, didn't you?" "I did. Good," Ree said. "About damn time." He dusted off his hands. "Well, I better get going. My truck is running illegal in this zone." He started to turn, then stopped. He looked at the bottom box. "You know," he said, frowning slightly, "that bottom one is heavy. It's weirdly heavy, and it has a seal on it I ain't never seen before." Gordon didn't even look inside. Just wanted it gone. I looked at the bottom box. It was wrapped in old packing tape that had yellowed with age. But right in the center, seemingly melted onto the cardboard itself, was a wax seal. It was dark red, almost black, and stamped into the wax was a single word in an elegant, archaic font. Hale. I had never seen that name before. I had never seen that seal. "What is that?" I whispered. "I don't know, kid," Ray said, stepping back out into the night. "But whatever it is, they were in a big hurry to make sure you never saw it." He closed the door, leaving me alone in the hallway. I stared at the boxes. 8:21 p.m. I had just calculated the cost of my past in a spreadsheet. But as I reached for a box cutter to slice open the tape on that bottom carton, I had a feeling I was about to discover the price of my history. And unlike the $82,000, this was a number I wasn't prepared for. Uncle Ray did not leave. He must have seen the way my hands were trembling as I stared at the cardboard towers on my entry table, because he stepped back inside and closed the door against the night air. He did not say anything. He just leaned against the wall, his thumbs hooked into the belt loops of his jeans, standing guard while I performed the autopsy on my own memories. The boxes smelled of the Mercer basement. It was a specific scent. A mixture of damp concrete, mildew, and the faint sweet rot of things that have been forgotten. It was the smell of my childhood. I reached for the box cutter I kept in the junk drawer. My movements felt mechanical, jerky, like a marionette being operated by an amateur. I sliced the tape on the first box. It gave way with a sharp sip sound that seemed too loud in the quiet apartment. I folded back the flaps. The first thing I saw was red. It was a cashmere scarf, a deep, rich crimson. I reached in and pulled it out. The wool was soft, luxurious against my fingertips. I remembered buying this. It was 4 years ago. Diane had complained for months about the draft in her office, about how her neck was always cold. I had saved up for 2 pay periods to buy this specific brand because she had circled it in a catalog. Cost $180. I turned the scarf over in my hands. There, dangling from the fringe, was the price tag, and next to it, the manufacturer's label. It had never been worn. It had never even been unfolded. The creases were sharp, factory pressed. I felt a cold stone settle in my stomach. I dug deeper into the box. Here was the leather watch case I had given Gordon for Father's Day 3 years ago. I opened it. The watch was inside, still wrapped in the protective plastic film. The battery was dead. The hands were frozen at 10. He had thanked me for it. He'd put it on his wrist and smiled. And the moment I left the house, he must have taken it off, put it back in the box, and thrown it into the darkness of the basement. Here was the high-end hair straightener for Sabrina. The box was still shrink-wrapped. Here was the aromatherapy diffuser, unopened, item after item. Birthday after Christmas after Mother's Day. I had spent hours agonizing over these gifts. I had spent thousands of dollars trying to find the perfect object that would say, "I love you, and please love me back, and I am successful. Are you proud?" They had not rejected the gifts. That would have been honest. Instead, they had taken them, smiled, and then buried them like hazardous waste. They did not want my thoughtfulness. They only wanted the check that came inside the card. I shoved the box away, slid across the floor, and hit the wall with a dull thud. Open the next one, Ray said softly. He wasn't pushing me. He was guiding me through the fire. I opened the second box. This one was lighter. It was filled with paper. I reached in and pulled out a handful. They were envelopes, hundreds of them. I recognized my own handwriting on the front. Mom, Gordon, Sabrina, happy birthday. Merry Christmas, get well soon. I picked up a blue envelope. I remembered this one. Was from when Sabrina broke her leg skiing a trip I had paid for. I had written her a long letter about how brave she was. I opened the envelope. It was empty. I picked up another empty. I dumped the box upside down. A cascade of envelopes fluttered to the floor like dead leaves. There were no cards. There were no letters. They had opened the envelopes, extracted the cash or the check, and discarded the sentiment. They had kept the wrappers, likely out of sheer laziness or hoarding instinct, but they had thrown away my words. I felt a sob rising in my throat, hot and jagged. I had written so much love into those cards. I had poured my heart out in ink, trying to bridge the gap between us. And they had treated my words like packing peanuts trash to be pushed aside to get to the product. They kept the receipts, I whispered, my voice cracking, but they threw away the poetry. They are bottomless pits, Savannah Reese said. His voice was rough. You can pour the ocean into a cracked bucket and it will never be full. I turned to the third box. I was shaking violently now. I didn't want to open it. I wanted to set it on fire, but I had to know. I cut the tape. Inside this box, there was only one thing. Was a large, heavy book, bound in faux leather. My breath hitched. It was the scrapbook for their 25th anniversary 5 years ago. I had spent 6 months scanning old family photos. I had interviewed their friends. I had written captions. I had bought archival quality paper. I had built a visual history of the Mercer family, trying to prove to them and to myself that we were a real family, that we had happy memories. I lifted the heavy album out of the box. On the cover, stuck right over the gold-embossed title, Our Life Together, was a yellow sticky note. The handwriting was Dion's. Savannah's Project Storage. Not the anniversary album, not our memories. Savannah's project, like it was a third-grade diorama I had brought home from school, like it was a nuisance they had to tolerate. I opened the book, the spine cracked loud and sharp, a sound that told me it had never been opened before. I looked at the photos I had lovingly arranged. Me and Sabrina at the beach. Gordon teaching me to ride a bike. A photo I had hunted down from a neighbor, because Gordon didn't keep any photos of me. Diane laughing at a picnic. I realized then with a clarity that was blinding that I was the only one holding the pen. I was the only one writing the story of this family. To them, I wasn't a character in the book. I was the publisher. I was the financier. I dropped the album on the floor. I put my hands over my face and I cried. I didn't cry for the $82,000. I didn't cry for the fraud. I cried because for 34 years I had been auditioning for a role that didn't exist. I had been screaming, I am here, into a void, and the void had only ever replied, insert cash to continue. I felt Ray's hand on my shoulder. It was heavy and warm. He squeezed hard. Let it out, he said. Grieve it, kid. Grieve the parents you wanted. But don't you dare grieve the ones you got. I just wanted them to see me, I choked out, the tears leaking through my fingers. I just wanted them to look at me and see something other than a bank balance. You can't buy love from people who are bankrupt inside, Reese said. He didn't offer me a tissue. He didn't tell me it would be okay. He told me the truth. They are hollow. Savannah, you have been trying to furnish an empty house. It ain't your fault the furniture keeps falling through the floorboards. He patted my shoulder once more, then stepped back. I am going to get these out of here, Ray said. You don't need this trash in your house. It stinks of them. He bent down to pick up the third box. It's the one I had just pulled the album from. He tilted it to get a better grip. Hold on, he grunted. He frowned, looking into the bottom of the empty carton. There is something stuck under the bottom flap. I wiped my eyes with the back of my hand, sniffing. What? Ree reached into the box. He grunted with effort as he wedged his fingers under the cardboard folds at the bottom. It was jammed in tight, he said. Looks like it slid under the flap's ears. A go and got stuck. He pulled out a thick manila envelope. It wasn't like the other envelopes. It wasn't a greeting card. It was old. The paper was yellowed and brittle at the edges, but it was thick, high-quality stock, and it smelled different. Didn't smell like mildew. It smelled of cedar and old tobacco. Ray handed it to me. This has your name on it. I took it. It was heavy, much heavier than paper should be. I looked at the front in a strong, angular handwriting ink that had faded to a sepia tone, but was still legible. It read, Savannah Chapman, personal, time-sensitive. My heart stopped. Chapman was my birth father's name. Diane never used it. She always insisted I use Mercer on everything but legal documents. To see it written there so boldly felt like a transgression. But it was the back of the envelope that made the hair on my arm stand up. Sealing the flap was a circle of dark red wax. It was cracked down the middle from age, but the impression was still perfect. Hail, I ran my thumb over the wax. It was cold and hard. Hail, I whispered. Ree, what is this? I told you, Ree said, his voice low. I have never seen that seal. But Diane kept that box in the back of the closet behind the Christmas decorations. She told everyone it was old taxpayers. My hands were shaking again, but not from grief this time. This was fear. This was the vibration of a secret about to be exhumed. I slid my finger under the flap, breaking the wax seal. It snapped with a dry click. I reached inside. The first thing I pulled out was a small, heavy brass key. It was tarnished, but I could see a number engraved on the head, 404. It looked like a safe deposit box key. The second thing was a business card. It was thick, cream-colored cardstock. Mason Klein, attorneys at Trust Estates, 1400 Skyline, Bluffed, D. Denver. And then there was the photograph. 'Twas a glossy 4x6 print. The colors were slightly faded, shifting toward magenta, as old photos do. It showed a man standing on a porch. It was tall, wearing a charcoal gray suit that looked expensive even in the old photo. He had dark hair, swept back. He had a strong jawline. He looked exactly like me. I stared at his face. It was like looking in a mirror that distorted time. The shape of the eyes, the curve of the eyebrows. It was undeniable. Diane had always told me my father was a drifter, a mechanic named Chuck or Charlie who died in a motorcycle accident 3 months before I was born. She said he had no family, no money, and no future. She said I was lucky to have Gordon, but the man in the photo did not look like a drifter. He looked like a king, and he was holding a baby. The baby was wrapped in a pink blanket. A tiny hand was reaching up, grasping the man's lapel. The man was looking down at the baby with an expression of such intense, fierce love that it hurt to look at. It was the look I had been searching for in Gordon's eyes for 30 years and never found. I flipped the photo over. There was writing on the back in that same angular script. R.O. Glen, 1991, 1991, the year I was born. And below the date, a sentence that made the room spin. A sentence that rewrote my entire history in 10 words. We will find you again, V.H. Ray, I whispered. The air left my lungs. They told me he died. Ray looked at the photo over my shoulder. He let out a long, slow breath through his teeth. Diane is a liar, Savannah Ree said. We always knew she was a liar, but this. He pointed to the initials VH. This ain't a lie, Ree said. This is a ghost story. I looked at the man who looked like me. I looked at the baby that was undeniably me. He wasn't dead, or at least he hadn't died before I was born. He had held me. He had known me. and someone named VH had promised to find me. Why was this in Diane's box? Why was it hidden under the false bottom of a carton labeled junk? The answer hit me with the force of a physical blow. They hadn't just stolen my money. They hadn't just stolen my credit. It'd stolen my father. I gripped the brass key in my hand until the metal bit into my palm. The sadness was gone. The forensic detachment was gone. Now there was only the hunt, I said, and my voice sounded different. It was deeper. It was dangerous. Don't take these boxes to the dump. No, no, I said, looking at the wax seal. Keep them. They are evidence. I looked at the business card. Again, Mason Klein. Tomorrow morning, I said, I'm not going to work. I am going to Denver. I looked at the man in the photo one last time. They told me you were dead. I whispered to him, let's see if they can explain why you are holding me. The text message from my family had said, don't contact us. They had no idea. They had absolutely no idea that by cutting me off, they had just handed me the key to the cage they had kept me in since birth. The bank was closed, but the investigation had just begun. The drive to Denver took 2 hours, but my mind was traveling across 3 decades. I had the brass key in my pocket. I had the photograph of the man who looked like me on the passenger seat. And I had a silence in my phone that felt louder than any scream. The address on the card, 1400 Skyline Boulevard, belonged to a glass monolith that scraped the belly of the clouds. This was not the kind of building where you went to fight a traffic ticket. This was the kind of building where empires were divided and silence was purchased. I took the elevator to the 42nd floor. Bang! It was the most beautiful sound I had ever heard. Diane screamed, "No, you can't, Savannah! Tell them we are your parents." Gordon was trying to push past her to get to the aisle, but the bafe blocked his path. Sabrina was wailing, her face buried in her hands. I gathered my files. I clicked off the laser pointer. I walked over to them. I stopped just outside the railing. Diane looked up at me, mascara running down her cheeks, her face a mask of desperation. "Savannah," she begged, "please, we can fix this. We just wanted to be close to you. We just wanted family." I looked at her. I looked at the woman who had charged me for existing while she spent. Millions meant for my care. You sent me a text message on Monday. I said, "Do you remember what it said?" Diane stared at me blankly. It said, Don't contact us. We need space. I leaned in closer. You told me to disappear, I said softly. You wanted me to be a ghost so you could keep your secrets. Well, Mom, you got your wish. I stood up straight and looked at all three of them. I am disappearing from your control. I am disappearing from your debt. And I am disappearing from your lives. I turned my back on them. Forever. I walked down the aisle. Elliot was waiting for me at the gate. He held out his hand. I took it. We walked out of the courtroom together, leaving the screams of the Mercers behind us, locked behind the heavy oak doors of justice. As we stepped out into the bright Denver sunlight, I took a deep breath. The air tasted clean. It tasted expensive, but mostly it tasted free. The numbers finally balanced. The ledger was closed, and for the first time in 34 years, my net worth wasn't negative. It was infinite. Thank you so much for listening to this story. If you have ever felt like you were the bank for your family, or if you just love seeing justice served cold, please let me know in the comments which city you are tuning in from. I love seeing how far our community reaches. Don't forget to subscribe to Maya Revenge Stories. Hit that like button and smash the hype button so we can get this story out to more people who need to hear it.